Okay. Welcome, everyone. I am Adam Perlman, and I am the Director of KEF International. I'm going to be giving a webinar today for you that will hopefully help you begin to understand um, how the shipping process works, and hopefully give you a lot of advice and a lot of information that you'll need. Some of the information will just be initial, and as you get into the shipping process, um, you'll get more details, and you're welcome to ask questions and sort of get things tailored to what you need. Really, each move, when people make a move, they're usually coming into the process for the first time. They haven't done it before. Oleh, new immigrants will get 3 tax-free shipments over the course of 3 years of their Aliyah. Most people will just use one, but you do have the flexibility of having 3 tax-free shipments over the course of 3 years. So because people are just doing it one time, people usually don't know a lot of the details, or certainly a lot of the nuances about how to go about thinking about what the best solution is for you. So we're going to go through how shipping works, the different options, the different services, how to look at a shipping quote, how to understand insurance, what packing is included. Really everything we'll cover, and hopefully for you it'll just give you the knowledge to be able to make the best decision about what type of shipment you need, and then to understand as things go along in your shipment, what to expect and how to how what you need to do. So as we'll see in a minute, there are 2 different types of shipments. There's really 2 different categories of shipments. One is a full container, and a full container could be a 20-foot long container, or it could be a 40-foot long container. Those are the 2 options. There's also a 40-foot high cube container, which is a bit taller. That's the largest container that you could send, is a 40-foot high cube. And then there's another category of shipments that's a shared container. And when we say a shared container, some people ask, is that what people often ask about piggybacking, or when you put somebody else's stuff into your lift? And the answer is no. A shared container, it's not really legal to do that, what we call piggybacking, where you put other people's things into your shipment, although we can talk about that if people want to know about that. When we say a shared container, we're talking about a shipment that the shipper is putting several people's things into one larger container. And the logistics of that type of shipment are very different from when you have your own container. Now, the shared container shipment is going to be a good solution for somebody that has relatively a smaller shipment. Once you get to a certain size, then it's going to be better for you to send your own container. And so right off the bat, as you're listening to the webinar, or as you're thinking about a shipment in general, if you know that you're sending a full household of things, then you should know that you're definitely in the category of sending your own container. We would then go through an assessment to see if you need a 20-foot long container or a 40-foot long container. But if you have a full household or a full apartment of furniture, you're going to need your own container. On the other side, if you're just sending, your basic things like clothing and dishes and household items, but no furniture, if you're not sending any furniture at all, then you're definitely in the category of needing a shared container. It's not going to be worth it to send your own container if you have a real small shipment like that. So if you're in either of those categories, part of the webinar is not going to be so relevant to you, because you already know that you're in a full container or a shared container. There are other people that are still thinking about what's worth shipping, and whether to send more, whether to send less. For those people, then you need at this point to understand both types of shipments, the shared container and the full container, so that you can sort of think through what solution is going to be best for you. So in the talk, we're going to describe and go into the differences between those 2 types of shipments, and there's pretty substantial differences. in the way the process works, in the timing of when you get it, how the pricing works. All of it is quite different between those two types of shipments, and we'll go into how they're different. So before we do that, we can just sort of as an introduction, I mentioned a few of these things, that somebody coming into the shipping process, people say to me all the time at the time of their move that how flustered they are and how everything is in transition, and they sort of apologize to me, and I always tell them, don't worry about it. Everybody that I'm talking to says that. When you're making your shipment, it's right at a time when you're moving internationally. People are selling houses, looking for new residences in Israel. The kids are moving and looking for schools, all kinds of changes. So, and usually the shipment is the last thing that people do after everything else falls into place. And so it's a pretty hectic time, and important to put your things into somebody's hands that knows what they're doing, that is reliable, that you can get references for, that you can talk to other people that have used the company that you're thinking about using, and see how it went. Because in shipping, there are companies out there that are offering very low shipping costs, and they're often either not including all the costs or not including all the services, and the stories that people have of getting hit with surprises are, unfortunately, you could read those, and most of those where people get hit with unknowns is at the port in Israel. You want to be careful. We'll talk about this in the quote, that the shipping quote includes all of the standard costs at the port in Israel. Often an American-based company will not even know that what's happening in Israel, and will leave it out. But that's sort of an opening for getting hit with extra costs if the fees at the port in Israel are not included in your quote. So that's one thing to be aware of. We'll go into that in more detail. But you're going to want to have somebody that is really communicating well with you, giving you the information that you need in a timely way, and answering your questions, because again, people are coming into this for the first time, and there's a lot of details to deal with, and you're going to want somebody who's really responsive and responsive on both sides of the ocean. Remember, part of the move is happening over in America, and part of it's happening over here, and you want to know who you're going to be dealing with over there in America, as well as who you're going to be dealing with here in Israel. And that subject leads me into another point that I always want to start with, just because people aren't usually aware of this, and that is that international shipping, because it's an international business, and no company has a presence everywhere. So all shipping companies use an agent, which is a third party, a different company, not their own company, for part of the move. So I'm based in Israel, so we have a network of agents around the USA, and they act as our agent for the packing. They would do the survey. We'll talk about in a minute the first stage in getting you a shipping quote, and that is to have a free on-site survey. So in my case, I'm here in Israel, so I would, if somebody requests a survey from me, I then pass the information on to my agent in your area. They give you a call, make an appointment, and they'll do a survey, give me the results of the survey, and then they're going to give me their costs and assessment from the survey that I will put into a total shipping quote from door to door that is going to include full packing. There's some places that you can have partial packing, which means that you pack the things that are not breakable. But as we'll go into later, all the furniture and all the breakables, delicates, need to be professionally packed in order to be insured for damage. The quote is going to include full packing, the packing materials, shipping, clearing through customs in Israel, and delivery to your residence in Israel, where they'll put the books in the rooms that you want and unwrap the furniture. They'll put together simple furniture like beds or tables or things with legs, but usually it does not include complicated pieces like wardrobes or bunk beds. And it also includes the standard fees at the port in Israel. So that's one of the things I mentioned before. That's really important that your quote include the fees at the port in Israel. Now, like I mentioned, that I have agents around America. If you, for instance, requested a quote from a shipping company that's based in America, so they're going to be using an agent over here in Israel for that part of the move over here, for the clearing it through customs and the delivery. And you want to be careful that you want to know who you're dealing with over here, because the part of the move that happens over here in Israel has some unique aspects to it, because if you're an Oleh Chadash, you're going to be clearing your shipment through customs tax-free, and you have to get that status established, and you want somebody over here that knows what they're doing and that can do that quickly and easily, because especially when you're sending your own container, you really need the customs clearing to go quickly in order to avoid extra fees at the port in Israel, because any full container shipment, as we'll talk about soon, you only get 4 days of free usage of the container from the day that the container arrives at the port in Israel. And they count every day that it's there, even over the weekends or holidays. And then they start to charge you fairly high fees on a container after 4 days, and those fees go up. So it's very, very important, number one, that you arrive in Israel before the container does if you're sending your own container. And number two, that the customs, that you get us the customs clearing documents, and that we can then clear it through customs, so that you have to be ready with a full container. You have to be ready to receive your things when you get here, because you only get those 4 days of free usage of the container. So that is sort of a general background of how the shipping works. Sometimes it can be funny that because all companies are using an agent elsewhere, like for instance, in some places, my agent, let's say my agent in New York, is going to be he does jobs for me all the time, right? But there's another company, there may be another company that's based in Israel, that he does jobs for them as well. So a customer might ask for a quote from me and from that other company as well, and it can be confusing when all of a sudden they find out that the same agent in the U.S. is working for two companies. That's not a problem. It's normal. It happens. The agent would then just do one survey, send the results to both companies, and you'd get a quote from each company, and you'd be deciding which one of them you want to work with, and it'd be the same packers in that case, but it would be a different team doing the delivery in Israel, a different insurance company that you'd be dealing with if you do have a claim, and the people that you'd be in contact with throughout the process would obviously be different. So, okay. Any questions at this point before we sort of jump in? Everything clear? Okay. So if you see on the PowerPoint here, like I mentioned, people coming into the shipping process, usually the first time they're doing it, we really recommend educating yourself about how the process works, which is great that you're listening to the webinar. We have a number of different formats that we can send you by email. Some of you may already have them if you've been in touch with us. We have a longer brochure, a shorter brochure, this PowerPoint we send you. We have an Excel spreadsheet that we send you that you can sort of see examples of different volumes of things. A 3-seat couch might be 80 cubic feet. It's important to start to get comfortable or to get familiar with sizes that are measured in cubic feet, because that's what your survey and your quote is going to be based on, is a survey that's assessing the volume, the size of your shipment, which is measured in cubic feet. So those are resources that you can use to start to learn about the process. Another great way is to talk to former Olim, ask them how their experience was, what advice they would give you, because there's ein chacham k'mo ba'al nisayon. no wisdom like the person who has experience. So definitely worth talking to people who have already shipped and see what they recommend. I know just in my own dealings with people, there's certain lessons or certain things that I'm going to try to give over to you, based on the different types of shipments we're going to discuss. But although I have sent 2 shipments in my own process of making Aliyah, certainly good to get other people's experiences and see what you can learn from that. We can check the Nefesh B'Nefesh forums, or there's usually a lot of people there that'll give feedback. Like we mentioned, important to choose a reliable shipper. In my opinion, somebody based in Israel is better because, the whole shipment is really important, but to have somebody here, choosing an American shipper puts you in the position of dealing with his agent over here, which you might not necessarily know who they are or how they are to work with for the customs clearing process. So it's important to know on both sides of the ocean who you're going to be working with. As far as the quote goes, very important to really ask good questions and make sure you get a breakdown of all the potential costs. Really look at the section that says not included in your quotes, so you can really compare apples to apples when you're looking at quotes. And best to plan as early as you can. A good 4 months before you're actually moving is a good time to start making a plan and get the process going. 3 months is usually okay as well. 2 months is tight. 2 months, starts to be, we need to get the survey set up and get you a quote and have you choose what kind of shipment you want. You usually want to book your move in the summertime, 2 months before you're actually moving. You can do it 6 weeks if you have to. It's still okay. Inside of that, when you start to get to a month, it starts to, it can be okay. Sometimes people can't commit. They're selling a house, but once you start to get around a month before, you really need to be in touch with your shipper, because shippers can be totally booked up in the summertime, especially a month in advance. They tend to be more booked up at the end of the month than most people want to move. And if you're moving at all, like around July, that time, that's the busiest time of the year. Everybody wants to get their stuff before Rosh Hashanah and get there before the kids go back to school and things. So that's a really busy time. So from now on, if you're moving in the summer, you want to get your survey set up as early as possible. So okay. So we mentioned before that Oleh have rights to 3 tax-free shipments over the course of 3 years. What that means is that you get tax-free on customs taxes on normal household items, books, linen, toys, clothing, dishes, all furniture, all that stuff will be tax-free. There are funny things that are taxable, like building materials or sports equipment is actually taxable, or disposables or outdoor furniture. Those are things that can be taxed. Appliances, you get 1 of each appliance. After that, you can bring in more, but they would be taxable. With computers, you get 2 tax-free, and TVs, you get 2 tax-free. You could bring in 4 computers. It's not a problem. Laptops, I would recommend just bringing with you on the plane, but if you're sending desktops, you could bring in 4, and then 2 would come in tax-free, and then the other 2, we make a declaration to customs of their values, and you pay taxes. So it's not a big deal. If we declare a computer at $100, a used computer, you pay $18 in taxes on it. So it's not that you can't bring it. It's just that you would have taxes beyond the things that are covered by your rights. Gas grills now are not a good thing to send. I would not send a gas grill. The only ones you can send are a new gas grill, and there's an extra documentation process and costs of several $100s to bring in a gas grill. It's your call, but it gives you another thing to do right when your shipment is coming in. It is true that the gas grills here in Israel are expensive. So even with the several $100s that you would have to pay in getting the grill into Israel, which you could save a couple $100. It's going to be your call whether to do that or not, or whether to just buy it in Israel. But there is special complications now with bringing in a gas grill. Any questions about that as far as rights or taxes or things like that? One very common question is that you do pay what's called VAT on the services in Israel, and Oleh does pay VAT. Even though they get customs taxes off their goods, they do pay VAT, which is 18% of the services that happen in Israel. So in your shipping quote, you'll often have a line of the cost of VAT on the services that happen in Israel. Okay, now let's get into talking about volume, because the main factor that's going to affect both the price of your shipment and the type of shipment that you're going to need is the volume, the size of the shipment. Volume is a three-dimensional measurement, right, that has length and width and height, like a cube. So 1 cubic foot is a box that's 1 foot long by 1 foot wide by 1 foot deep. That's 1 cubic foot. That's a measurement of volume. And the first stage in getting a price quote for you, like we mentioned, is to have a free on-site survey where someone's going to assess the size of your shipment. They're going to make a list of all the things you show them that you're sending. You can tell them other things you're planning on purchasing. And they're going to make a written list that we're going to get a copy of, and you will also get a copy of with your price quote. That's going to have at the bottom line of your survey is going to have a total cubic footage. That's just an estimate. It's only an estimate, but that's going to estimate the volume of your shipment. Now, I mentioned a few different categories of shipments, and I'll give you a few examples of volumes just so you can begin to be familiar with it in terms of understanding your own shipment when you have a survey done. So usually for most places around the U.S., the smallest shipment that you can send is about 200 cubic feet. And 200 cubic feet is roughly around 40 medium-sized boxes, and that's it. That would definitely go into a shared container. And, if you're below that, then it's sort of what I call no man's land. A lot of people call up and say, look, I have 10 boxes. I don't know what to do with it. I can't take it on the plane, but they don't have enough to send, their own shipment. And that's when they start to ask, can I find somebody else who's sending a shipment and put it into theirs? We cannot do that for you, but you can certainly ask that, and people do ask it in the Nefesh B'Nefesh forums. So we talked about 200 cubic feet as being the smallest shipment that you can send. In New York, you can go smaller. It can be even 100, 150. But most locations around the U.S., the minimum is going to be 150 or 200. Certainly in the middle of the country, 200. In L.A. or in Florida, you can do 150. So then as shipments get larger, 200 cubic feet, 300, 400, 500, 600 cubic feet, all of those would still be in a shared container. Still at that size, up to say 600 cubic feet, it's still not worth it to send your own container. But once you start going over 600 cubic feet, then you're going to want to start to also get a quote for your own container, for your own 20-foot long container. Now, a 20-foot long container has roughly in it about 1,000 cubic feet is in a 20-foot container. So we mentioned that 200 cubic feet is around 40 medium-sized boxes, and that's it. A 20-foot long container has 1,000 cubic feet, and that's roughly the contents of like a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So that's got a good amount of furniture in it, 1,000 cubic feet. The next size up of a container is a 40-foot container, which is double the size, right? So it has about 2,000 cubic feet, and it has roughly the contents of like a 4 or 5 bedroom home in it. That's like an 18-wheel truck. It's the size of that container. So in shipping, as shipments get larger, the price per unit goes down significantly. It's like anything that you buy in bulk. Like if you're starting out with a 200 cubic foot shipment, you're paying the highest rates per unit, and because of that, I always recommend to people, if you're in a shared container, you want to keep your shipment small. You don't want to start adding lots of stuff, and because there's a line that if you go over a certain line, and it changes depending on the location of, but somewhere around 700 cubic feet, somewhere in there, if you go over that in a shared container, you can actually end up spending more money and sending less stuff and significantly less stuff than you would have with your own 20-foot long container. So anytime you approach that line, hopefully your shipper will offer you both options. To say you're sort of right at the cutoff point, and if you want to keep your shipment small, you could go with a shared container. If you want to add more stuff or send everything, then a 20-foot container would be better. Now again, we're going to go into the differences in those between those two types of shipments, and there's a lot of differences. But now we're just trying to get a sense of get familiar with different volumes and at what size, what type of shipment you would need. So just to give you a general picture of the costs that we're talking about, and I'll start with New York, which is the cheapest place that you can ship from in the U.S. 200 cubic feet is going to be a little over $2,000 door to door, including the fees at the port in Israel, but not including your marine insurance, because we'll talk about how that works, but your insurance is going to be based on how much you're going to need to insure your shipment for. So you'll have a rate for the insurance, but you won't know how much it costs until you decide how much to insure your shipment for. So 200 cubic feet is around $2,000, a little bit more, plus your insurance. There's, in a shared container, you're going to have a rate per cubic foot. You're going to pay for every single cubic foot, and relatively it's a pretty high rate. Even though New York is the cheapest place, you're still in a shared container. You'll be paying for, based on the actual size of your shipment. So it'll go up from $2,000, and then somewhere around 700 cubic feet, it'll start to approach the cost of your own 20-foot container. And remember, in a 20-foot container, we have how many cubic feet? Like if 700 cubic feet in a shared container starts to approach the cost of a 20-foot container, how many cubic feet do you remember we have in a 20-foot container? Anybody remember? You have about 1,000 cubic feet in a 20-foot container. So you can see, if you're sending 700 in the shared container and the price becomes similar versus 1,000 in the 20-foot container, you're really sending a lot more stuff for the same amount of money. And a 20-foot container door-to-door from New York, including the fees in Israel, is probably around $6,200 door-to-door, plus your insurance. And a full 40-foot container from New York is probably around $9,000, a little bit less, door-to-door. And if you're talking about other locations in the center of the country, those numbers can go up quite a bit. Like a 20-foot container can certainly be $8,000, $9,000 in the center of the U.S., and a 40-foot container in the center of the U.S. can be $12,000, $13,000, $14,000. So the labor costs are higher. There's the trucking costs, and the closer you are to a port, it's usually cheaper. But New York is the cheapest. Okay. Any questions at this point? We just finished discussing volume. Volume is the main factor influencing the type of shipment that you'll need and the cost of the shipment. Okay, so you're going to request your volume estimate, a good 4 months ideally before you're actually moving. And we mentioned that there's 2 different types of shipments that you could choose. This slide here just gives you the technical terms in shipping for those 2 types of shipments. An FCL is called a full container load, which means that the container has only your things inside. It's just your stuff. We'll go into all of the characteristics of that type of shipment soon. The other type of shipment, which we call the shared container before, is the technical term is called an LCL, which means a less than a container load, which means that it wasn't a big enough shipment to make it warrant having its own container. Rather, it went into a shared container with several other smaller shipments that all went into the container together. That's also called a consolidation in the shipping. Excuse me. So, okay, now we're going to go and look over the characteristics of a full container, an exclusive container called an FCL. Number one, it's definitely the fastest way to ship. You will, without question, get your things sooner if you're sending your own shipment, your own container, as opposed to sending a shared container or a consolidation. Now, a full container, as we mentioned, is really for larger shipments relatively. They usually have a certain amount of furniture in them. Furniture is really the main factor that influences volume. The boxes, of course, really do add up, even significantly add up. Like if you're, a single person versus a family of 5 kids, there's going to be a lot more boxes with the family of 5 kids. But the first indication for me is, in terms of getting a sense of which type of shipment a person is looking at, is how much furniture they're sending. If they say they're really not sending any furniture, it's usually a shared container. If there's 1 or 2 pieces, still usually a shared container. If they're sending, a whole apartment or a whole house, then it'll certainly be their own container. Now, we mentioned that the rates per cubic foot are cheaper in a full container, but of course you're purchasing 1,000 cubic feet, so it still comes out more expensive than a shared container for small amounts. But once you go over a certain size, it'll be cheaper than a shared container. That's the important cutoff point that we talked about. One really important thing to remember that I mentioned briefly is the timing of a container, is that it's very important because you only get those 4 days of free usage of the container in Israel. It's really important that you arrive in Israel before the container does, which basically just means you don't want to send a container too early. You don't want to send it so it's going to arrive in Israel before you do. Sometimes people will do it on purpose so that it arrives, say, right around when they're arriving, because they want to get their things quickly, and that's fine. That's a perfectly legitimate choice, but you just have to understand that the more that you time it to coincide right with your arrival means that you have more of a chance of having extra fees on the container when it arrives in Israel, because you only get those 4 days free. If you want to avoid that, it's best to have it to make sure that you're going to arrive in Israel before the container does. But these are all things that people think about. We'll talk about the timing when we get to that slide, but of how to time your shipment. Meaning during the transition, when your things are in transit, where do you want to be without your stuff? You could either have your stuff picked up right before you fly, or you could go back several weeks, depending on where you are in the country, and have your things picked up, say, 3 weeks before you're flying, or something like that, so that you get your things quicker when you arrive in Israel. So each person sort of needs to think about that, where it's best for them to be without their things. Most people want to get their stuff in Israel fairly quickly, so that's usually what most people choose. Another really important thing to know, for some people it'll be important, for others it's not a factor that affects them. You have to, again, look at the different types of shipments and see which type of shipment best suits your needs. For somebody that needs to put their things into storage, a full container can be an issue because it's expensive to put things that are going in a full container shipment into storage. You can do it. There's storage available both in the U.S. and in Israel, but when you're sending your own container, they have to deliver your things to storage, and therefore they have to do what's called double handling. Instead of just loading your container or unloading it in Israel one time, they have to do it a second time to put it into the storage facility and then reload it to get delivered, and that's expensive. And there's no free storage at all in that scenario, because it goes right into a storage facility where you start to pay for the storage. We'll see in a shared container in a moment that it's the opposite. That the way a shared container works is it has very, very flexible terms for the storage, and it's not very expensive to put your things into storage with a shared container, with a consolidation, whereas with your own container, it's expensive to put your things into storage. Now, one thing I would mention when we're talking about the full containers is in many places, not everywhere, because it depends in the location in the country, and it also depends on the access of the residents, but in many places they will do what's called a live load, which means that they'll pack your things up at your residence and then load the container right at your residence. They'll bring the container right to your residence and load it there. That's called a live load. And then off the container goes right to the port from there, and it ships quickly. That's one of the reasons that an exclusive container arrives more quickly in Israel, is because it goes straight to the port, right from your residence, and off it goes. With a shared container, we'll see in a moment, the logistics of it are very different. Because a shared container gets picked up by a truck and then brought back to the warehouse to wait for other smaller shipments to be ready to be shipped to Israel, so it's, by definition, it's brought back already to the warehouse. So if you want to keep it there, you just keep it there in storage. You don't have to pay any double handling fees like you do on a full container. It's already has built into it this double handling of bringing it to the warehouse, and you can have it stored there if you needed to. You could have it stored in a shared container. You could have it stored either in America or in Israel, and we'll get to that in a second. So right now we've just covered the full container. We mentioned it's the fastest way to ship for larger shipments. It's more of a flat rate. One thing is that's also appealing about a full container is you usually get. We'll talk about the exceptions to this rule, but in general, a full container is more of a flat rate. If you're not filling up your whole container, you could get one part of the move can still be uncertain in terms of you don't know how much of the container you're going to fill up, and so you'll get a rate for how much based on how much of the container you fill up. But in general, a full container is more of a flat rate, the way it's quoted, versus a shared container, as we'll see in a moment, which has some built-in uncertainties in terms of the price, and we'll go into that in a moment now. But just wanted to see if anybody has any questions about the full containers. Okay, so let's move on then to the next slide. There's a picture of a 20-foot container, which we said, again, has 1,000 cubic feet. That's a 20-foot container. A 40-foot container is double that size and has about 2,000 cubic feet. Okay, now we're going to look at LCL shipments, which are consolidation or a shared container, often called a lift by people. So these are for smaller shipments. They have several, could be 4 or 5 smaller shipments that go into one large container that gets shipped together. The timing of shared container of a consolidation is significantly slower. There's a number of reasons for that, and it's also uncertain. It's more uncertain. Full container shipments are more regular. There can be delays of a week here and things, but in general, when you're sending a full container, it's pretty regular, the timing, and you can get a good expectation of what to expect under normal circumstances of what the timing would be. With a shared container, you really can't get as clear of a picture. That you can get a range of the timing, but one reason is we mentioned that they pick up your things, they'll pack your things at your residence in a shared container, and then they bring it by truck back to the warehouse. If a consolidation had just left, for instance, right before we had picked up your things. Then you have to wait until there's enough things at the warehouse in order to send another consolidation. That can take a couple weeks. Or it could be the opposite. When we pick up your things, it's just ready to go right into a consolidation. You're the last one, and off it goes, and it's going to go quicker to Israel. So that's one of the things that makes the timing uncertain in a shared container. The other factor is in Israel is that in a shared container, all of the shipments come out of the container in Israel, which does not happen in a full container. And then they go through customs after they've been unpacked, taken out of the container. And that also causes an extra timing. It can take a few weeks until you get your things in Israel for a shared container, whereas with a full container, the whole thing happens inside of a week to clear it through customs and get it delivered to you. So it's definitely slower and more uncertain in a shared container in terms of the timing. Some people like that. Some people need that. Some people need, they need time to get to Israel. Sometimes people are their new apartment in Israel is not ready, or for whatever reason, if people need a delay, then shared containers are better. If you need a delay, you need storage. Let's see, there's a question here. What do you mean by boxes? I'm packing a lot of my stuff in print or paper boxes. Okay, so if we're talking about book boxes are usually small. Somebody just asked a question, what did I mean by boxes? But if you're packing things up by yourself, I would just be aware that it's really best for sorting purposes. You can pack your things up, but I would not pack up breakables or certainly furniture because you can't insure them if they're packed by you. And what I mean by packed by you is that the boxes are sealed. One thing that is a really important document in a shipping in the shipping process is called the packing list, and the packers are going to make up this thing called the packing list on the packing day, and anything that goes into the shipment that's already been sealed up by you, that's a sealed box, is going to be listed on the packing list. That's what's called PBO, which is packed by the owner, and PBO boxes can't be insured for damages, and they can only be insured up to a certain amount. So if you're going to start putting things in the boxes, it's best if you don't seal them. If we can just see what's inside and we seal the boxes, then it'll go on the packing list as if we packed it. So that's just one piece of advice. So you can put things into boxes that you want, especially if they're not breakable things. But another thing to remember is that in shipping, the materials that we're going to provide for a shipment are stronger than normal boxes. Shipping, like international shipping, is rougher than a local move. And so the packing is different. They use double-walled cardboard for the boxes, and they wrap all the furniture with bubble wrap, and then wrap that on the outside of it with paper. And just be aware that if you're going to put things into boxes, you might not be using the same quality boxes that they would have if we do it. So somebody just asked the question here that I was told not to pack silver. What do you do with it? Yeah, remember, you shouldn't pack anything. The only thing that you should pack, if you want to, is the non-breakables, which is clothing, books, toys, or linens. And even that stuff, it's best if you just leave the boxes unsealed and let us do it. But anything, and like silver is a good example of something that you would really want to insure, right? It's something that has value. And so if you pack up silver by yourself and seal it, it's going to be listed on the packing list as PBO, packed by the owner, and you're really going to be limited in how you can insure it. Even though sometimes people might do a great job of packing their own things, the insurance company doesn't rely on that, and so they then require people to have any delicates or any valuables or any furniture professionally packed. So all you do is when you have when you have your survey done, you'll show the person doing the survey everything that you're sending, and their services are going to include packing up all of your breakables, all of your delicates, all of that silver. We're going to pack it up, and we're going to pack it in the way that it needs to be. And once we've packed it up, then you can insure it for as much as you want to, based on its real values. We're going to get into insurance and how that works. It's based on the replacement value of the actual item that you're insuring. But with silver, certainly let the professional packers pack silver. Okay, so back to a consolidation and shared container. Like we mentioned that in a shared container, it's a smaller volume, and so you're paying a higher cost per cubic foot in a shared container. By definition, it's going to really be, it can be significantly higher. Often it can be double the cost of, say, a volume that's already inside of a container, like a 20-foot container. So it's important to be aware of that. If you are sending a shared container, you want to be more careful about adding things. You don't want to add lots and lots of new things to the shipment because you can jump over that cutoff point that I told you where it'll end up being more expensive to send less stuff. So one thing you can do at the time of the survey that I would really recommend if you're not sure what size shipment you want to send is you could tell the person doing the survey, you could say, okay, these are the items that are definitely going, and I would like one quote for those, and then these are items that are maybe going. I'm not sure if I'm going to send them or not. Can you add those into the survey as maybe items and then send me a second quote that includes the maybe items? And then you'll see which range you're in and which type of options you have, and you can see which one makes more sense to you. Basically, the way I always present it is a shared container is a decision to save money and keep your shipment relatively small. That means you want to take out large items that are not so great to have in Israel, like old furniture that's really not in great shape. You wouldn't want to send that as much in a shared container. Whereas if you're sending a 40-foot container and you have extra space in it, the extra space doesn't cost so much money, so you'd be a lot more free to add, to throw in a couch, or it's going to be a lot less. To do that. So the type of shipment that you're looking at can also really affect your decisions of what else you're going to send in the shipment. If with your essential items you're in a shared container, then you're going to be more careful about adding things. If with all of your essential items, if you're already into a larger container and you have extra space, then you know that, and that'll help you decide what to add or what other things to put in your shipment. Okay, so another really important thing to understand for any of you thinking about a shared container is there's an additional packing stage in a shared container that you pay for. That you pay for the remember, you pay by size, by the actual size of the shipment, and because in a shared container, your things are going into a container with other people's stuff. So what they do is they either put your things, after packing it up at your residence, they bring it back to the warehouse by truck. Then they put your things either into a wood box like this, it's called a lift van, it's a wood crate, or they put it on wood pallets and then they wrap it up, they shrink wrap it. There's two methods that they can use for that. So that extra packing stage separates your things from the other people's stuff that are in the container. And then in a shared container, like a person might have 4 pallets or something, 4 pallets of things that are in their shipment. And those pallets will come out of the container when it gets to Israel and then be delivered to you by truck in Israel on those pallets. So there's this additional packing stage that adds about 15 to 20% to both the size and the cost of your shipment, right? If you have, let's give an example of, let's say you have 500 cubic feet of items that's estimated at 500 cubic feet. If you sent that 500 cubic feet in your own containers, you'd have 500 cubic feet in a 20-foot container, and you might have 500 extra cubic feet of empty space that you could add more things. If you sent that 500 cubic feet in a shared container, in a consolidation, with the extra packing stage that's going to add, let's call it 20%, that's going to bump you up from 500 cubic feet to 600 cubic feet. Now that's really important to understand. You're going to pay based on the actual size of the shipment, which is 600 cubic feet. So the technical terms for it are what's called the net volume, is the volume of your things with just the packing. So when you're talking about sending your own container, you're only talking about the net volume, the volume of just your things when they're packed up. The term for when things are packed up to go in a consolidation, meaning that they're put on a wood pallet or in a wood crate, is called the gross volume, and that has the extra 15% or 20% built into it. So that's a really, really important thing to remember if you're thinking about a shared container. Another really important thing to know about a shared container, and this is the thing to know if you are sending a shared container, because each shipment has built into it certain things that are benefits, and certain things that you have to make sure you're careful with in each type of shipment. Like we mentioned, in the full container, you only get 4 days of free usage of the container once it arrives in Israel, so you have to be careful to arrive in Israel before the container does. With a shared container, what you need to be careful with is that the quote that we're going to give you is going to be based on an estimated volume from the survey, but in a shared container, you're going to be billed based on the actual size of your shipment. So let's say your volume, your estimated net volume, as an example, was around 320 cubic feet. Certainly the size of a shipment that would go in a shared container. We then estimate, we add the 20% to account for the for either the palletizing or the crating of the shipment. Let's say it comes up to 400 cubic feet. So I give you a quote for 400 cubic feet of gross volume in a shared container. That's gross volume after it's crated up. So your billing is going to be based on the actual size of the shipment. You're going to pack your things up at your residence, bring it back to the warehouse, get it ready for the export either on pallets or in crates, and then usually like in around, say, about a week after they've picked up your stuff, we're going to get a report of the actual size of the shipment, of the crates or the pallets of your shipment, and you're going to be billed based on the actual size. So if it came out to 480 cubic feet, you're going to have an extra 80 cubic feet of cost in your shipment, and you'll see when you get a shared container shipment, in the quote, it's going to have a line that says any additional volume we will be billed at a certain rate. In New York, it'll often be $6 a cubic foot for additional volume. In other locations around the country, it'll be more. Just really be aware of that with a shared container, you're billed based on the actual size of your shipment, so there's a built-in uncertainty in terms of the cost. And so what that means is with a shared container, you really want to be more careful about paying attention to the survey report that we sent you from the survey that was done, and just be aware if you're adding things, or if certain things were missed, or if you forgot to tell them, because you don't want to have a situation where, and we don't and you don't, where you go in with a shared container and have a much larger amount of things than we estimated, because your billing can go way up if there's really a significant difference between the estimate and the actual. It can go up a lot. So and there are certainly companies that take advantage of that, of underestimating the size of a shipment, and then afterwards you get hit with a much larger bill and a much larger shipment. But you should know that in any of these shipments, they should be able to show you the warehouse report, which is going to actually measure the size of your shipment. You can even have them measured when it comes to Israel, if there's any questions about that. But they're going to actually measure the crates or measure the pallets once they're all ready to go in America, and that's going to be what determines the billing of your shipment in a consolidation. So, okay, so now we've covered consolidations. Now the other thing we mentioned with a consolidation is they're much more flexible in terms of storage. In America, you can keep your things there because they're brought back to the warehouse. You could say, I'm not ready to have them shipped, please hold it there for me. You would get a certain amount, often a month or 2 weeks or a month of free storage in America. Also in Israel, with a shared container, because it comes out of the container at the port in Israel, the shipping company wants their container back as quickly as possible. Because they get it back in this type of shipment right away, then they give you 28 days of free storage at the port in Israel. If you weren't ready to have your things delivered right away in Israel, with a shared container, it's very easy and very flexible. It's no problem. Just hold it there. You get 28 days free. You could keep it there for up to 6 months at a fairly low cost. The cost of storage in Israel after the first month is that's free actually goes by the weight. That's the way they do it here. And so once your shipment goes over 1 metric ton of weight, you pay about $100 a month. And if it goes over that, it can be $200 a month. But it's pretty reasonable rates for the storage at the port in Israel. You can keep it there if you're not ready to receive your shipment. Any questions about shared containers before we move on to the next subject? Okie doke. So let's go to the next one. There is a picture of a pallet that they would shrink wrap and a lift van that they would put your things inside. Okay. So, storage. If you do need storage, it's important to really think about it in advance. Reasons for needing storage is often people have not found an apartment where they're going to live yet in Israel, or they've bought a place but it's not going to be ready in time, or that they need to be out of their place in America before, like months before they're actually going to fly to Israel, because sometimes their lease is done or they're selling a house. Any of those reasons that if you're going to need storage, you need to talk to your shipper about the best solution depending on how much storage you're going to need. So there are options to store in America. There are options to store in Israel. With an LCL shipment, we mentioned it's a lot more flexible, whereas FCLs have higher storage costs. But if you do have a large shipment, sometimes people need storage. So it's part of the move and part of the services you'll need if you do need storage and you are sending a larger shipment. Then your shipper should be able to give you all the options and figure out what the best one is for you, whether to store in America or whether to store in Israel. So, marine insurance. Insurance is not going to be included in the quote that you get. You're going to get a rate for the insurance. The rate, like an example of the insurance, you're usually going to, there's one kind of insurance that's called all risk, and there's another kind that's called total loss. Total loss insurance is really not worth anything. In our 35 years of doing this, I don't think we've had one shipment that has been a total loss, maybe one. But you're only going to get coverage in a total loss insurance if the whole thing is lost, which it does happen in shipping. I mean, there are stories, of containers getting, there was a tsunami, and there was, even at the port in Israel last year, there was an accident where some containers fell off of a boat and into the water. It didn't happen in any of ours, but it can happen. So, but total loss insurance is really not. It's exceedingly rare that you would need to make a claim on that. All risk insurance is usually what people take, and that gives you coverage for either loss or damage of individual items in your shipment. That's good coverage. And Nefesh B'Nefesh recommends insuring. If it's worth shipping it, then it's worth insuring it. And it's recommended to insure fully for the replacement value in Israel, which is often like 2 times the values in the States. And as we mentioned before, all breakables in our furniture need to be professionally packed in order to insure them for damage. It's important to know who the insurance company is you're dealing with, and if you can find people that have worked with them, because many of the shipping companies or many of the insurance companies that are out there are known for sort of dodging, not being easy to work with in the case of a claim. We have been using an insurance company for many years, decades really, and they're an American-based insurance company who we have a lot of experience with, and if you do have a claim, then we can assist you with it if you need it, and they're very good about giving you coverage, assuming that you insured it properly. So that's important to know. An example of a rate for an insurance policy that you would get in your quote is for a larger shipment, people will often take a $500 deductible over the whole shipment. For a smaller shipment, people take a smaller deductible, like a $150 deductible. So just to give you an example, like In a full container, you might take a $500 deductible policy. That's over the whole shipment. That means up to $500 of damage or loss you pay out of pocket. Beyond that, your insurance kicks in, and let's say you insured a full 40-foot container for $50,000 of coverage. So the rate for that policy is 2% of the total amount that you insure for. So the way insurance works, it's going to cost you a certain rate of the total amount that you insure for. So 2% of $50,000 would be $1,000 for $50,000 of coverage in a large 40-foot container. In a small shared container, you might have $150 deductible, which is 2.5%. So if you insured for $10,000 of 2.5%, it might cost you $250 in a small shared container. So that's the way the insurance works. Again, that's not going to be included in your quote. It's going to be up to you to decide how much to insure for. Certainly mention to this person doing the survey any delicate items that you have or any high-value items that you have, because those things are going to need to be packed properly in order to insure them. We're going to talk in a minute about packing. All the standard packing is going to be included in your quote, but there is a category that's called custom crating. Think like high-value pieces of artwork or a piano, a valuable piano can often need custom crating if you are sending any high-value items, and insurance companies will require artwork like that to be custom crated, which is not cheap. It's an additional cost, but you would just need to notify the person doing the survey if you have any high-value paintings or sculptures or artwork or anything delicate that would need custom crating, like things like a marble tabletop or a glass tabletop are going to need custom crating, because those things are known to not make it through the ocean journey if you don't crate them. So that's the way insurance and crating works. So when we're looking at a quote, when you're looking at your shipping quotes, be careful of, there really is market prices for these things. There's not a whole lot of play with them. Don't let yourself be pulled in by a really cheap quote, because the trick in the industry is to quote low and then have all kinds of extra things later. And so if you see quotes that are too low, make sure you're really getting a quote from a reliable company. Here I found a fitting cartoon from the New Yorker with exactly this idea of, you can see there it says the amazingly inexpensive moving company, and they're throwing the furniture out the window into the truck. There really are a number of good companies out there depending on where you're moving from, and best to be getting quotes from them and not try your luck with all kinds of, there's really new companies that come in and out of the industry and try to break the market and quote really low and stuff, but not worth getting into it, in my opinion. Best to get quotes from there's shippers that have been out here that have been doing this for many years and that Oleh use, and that you can really know that you're going in with somebody you can rely on. Okay, the whole question for many people of what's worth shipping and what's not worth shipping. Good question, important question. In my opinion, things that you want to ship are things that you're going to enjoy long-term in Israel. You don't want to send junky stuff. So, shipping is not cheap, but neither is buying things in Israel. So, it's sort of your one opportunity to bring things from America. So you want to figure out the things that are not worth bringing, and that tends to be large items that are in not such great shape. And you want to figure out the things that are worth bringing, and that takes some doing about figuring out what you want to bring from America. As far as appliances go, we do sell appliances. We sell 220 appliances that are made for Israel, but people bring a lot fewer appliances than they used to. There's a lot more available in Israel. It really depends. I wouldn't even get into certain appliances unless I'm really designing a kitchen, or unless you know the space you're moving into and the place you're going, that I wouldn't get into a fridge until you know that, and an oven until you know that. Probably the most common appliance that people do bring is the American washing machine, because people like the larger washing machine. An American washing machine doesn't heat its own water, so the cycle's a lot shorter, but it does need a hot water line to come to it. So if you're renting, you would have to make a change in the plumbing and bring a hot water line. You also need to make sure that if you're renting, that you're going to have space for an American washing machine, because the Israeli European machines are smaller. They're 60 centimeters, and you just need to know that you're going to have space for an American washer before you would buy it. Things like smaller appliances, dishwashers, TVs, unless you're really going high end, I would just buy in Israel. There is some savings on a TV, but it's not so much, and you won't have a warranty. The other appliances, larger appliances that you would buy with a service contract, which means installation and a 1-year warranty. But with smaller things, you would not have a warranty. Cars, the big question many people ask about whether it's worth sending a car. Most people look into it and decide that it's not. Cars are very hard to get used to, the prices of them in Israel, but whether you import or buy them in Israel, that's true. That cars are just very, very expensive. So you can see that unlike shipping your household goods, that you get tax-free on your household goods, if you bring a car, you just get a tax reduction. So you still pay a lot of money in customs taxes on a car, even with your Oleh rights. You're going to pay around 78% now of the value of the car just in customs taxes. So if it's a $30,000 car, you're going to pay $25,000 in customs taxes without even the shipping. So generally the wisdom as far as a car goes is it's not worth shipping a car unless it sells for about 200,000 shekels in Israel. So the higher end cars can really be worth sending, but other cars it's not worth getting into. So furniture, in my experience, American stuff is bigger. You have to be careful that American stuff is bigger, and it might not fit into where you're going to be living in Israel. So if you know that it's going to fit, and you already own good things that you like, good solid wood furniture, then it's usually worth shipping it. American stuff tends to be better quality, solid wood, whereas American things are often sandwich material, where it's not as good quality. So if you have good stuff, good beds, or I brought a dining room table and chairs that I'm really happy with 10 years later, and beds that we're really happy with. But they do dominate the rooms more in Israel because the rooms tend to be smaller. So you need to be aware of where you're moving to and what kind of furniture you're going to be bringing before you send it. You don't want to pay for something that you're not going to be able to use in Israel. So as far as what to ship, you want to find the things that you're really going to be happy to have. It's your chance to bring things over from America. Find things that would be really nice to have where you're living in Israel, and those are what you want to send. One thing to just keep in mind is that you do have 3 tax-free shipments over the course of 3 years. So you could, what some people do is send a small shipment, for instance, at the beginning. If they don't know where their permanent location is going to be, they could send a very small shipment at the beginning, and then a couple of years down the line, you could, without even going to America, you could purchase things online or make orders and have them sent directly to our warehouse and have them sent in another shipment later if you have a better sense of what you're going to need after being in Israel for a couple of years. And by the way, with any shipment that you send, you can always order anything you want from anywhere in America and have it added to the shipment by sending it directly to our warehouse. It doesn't have to go to your residence, but if you do know about things that you're going to purchase like that, make sure you tell them to the person doing the survey, because he'll add those items into his assessment of the size of your shipment if you already know that you're going to be buying those items. Okay, packing. So I mentioned before that in most of the quotes, it's going to include full packing, all the packing materials. There can be a discount if you don't pack, if you pack the non-breakables. It's not a big discount if you pack those things. So on a larger shipment, it could save you $400, but on a smaller shipment, significantly less than that, and then you also have to buy the packing materials for that. So it's not a big discount, and some places, some areas or some agents will offer that, and some don't. So you can ask if that's available if you do want that, if you want partial packing. You can usually have boxes delivered for your sorting once you've booked a move. And we mentioned before that in order to ensure against damage, all the delicate items and all the furniture needs to be packed professionally. Okay, so we talked before about this, that the full container shipments go right to the port and go right off for shipping, so they're faster and more predictable, whereas the consolidations go first to the warehouse and they take longer. Longer distances from Israel usually means a longer transit time. You know, if your LA is significantly longer than New York, and each port is going to have its own estimated transit time. So ask your shipper, depending on where you're shipping from, what the expected transit time is. Customs clearing in Israel. Once you get to Israel, as a new immigrant, you're going to need to get your things cleared through customs tax-free in order not to pay taxes. Now, Nefesh B'Nefesh really helps you with that now in terrific ways, where they provide you with the new documents that you need, and they even now will open up a file for you at customs, so you didn't even need to go there. So that's great. That's a new service that they're providing now. But that has to happen before your shipment can clear through customs. So you want that to happen before your shipment arrives in Israel, basically. And with a shared container, it's not as crucial because you have 28 days of free storage on the shared container. But with your own container, it's really important. But so you're going to want a shipper then that can process that your customs clearing quickly. Basically, after you've opened a file with customs, and that puts you into their computer system so that they know that not to tax any shipments of yours that arrive. All you're going to need to do is come to our office, which is in Jerusalem, or to our customs clearer in Tel Aviv. And I think now I've understood you don't even need to do that. But you can do everything from your. If you have a scanner at home, you can do it all from home. What we're going to need is clear scans of your passports and your documents. And if you have a scanner, at any place that you can get to a scanner, basically, you're going to be able to get us those documents. And once the file's been open at customs and you've gotten that documentation from Nefesh B'Nefesh, then we're all set to go. We just need the scans of your documents, and we can clear customs. So again, I've mentioned before, to avoid surprises in that whole process, choose a shipper based in Israel who really knows this process. Delivery. The delivery in Israel is they're going to put the boxes in the rooms that you want. They are going to unwrap the furniture and put together simple furniture like beds or tables or things with legs, and then they'll take away the debris and throw away the debris. But they won't put together. They won't put together. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. They won't put together complicated pieces in Israel. So if you do have things like a wardrobe or things like that, you can ask for a quote for getting those things put together if you want. But in the standard services, they'll put together simple furniture and not the complicated stuff. One of the things to be aware of in Israel is that your quote is going to be based on what's called normal access. Because in America, we're going to know the access to your residence from the survey. But in Israel, we usually don't know that until you give us the address there. And your quote is going to be based on normal access, which means that it assumes that we can park the truck to your building, and it includes up to 2 flights of stairs of carrying your things. If you lived on the 5th floor and there was no elevator, then there would certainly be extra costs. But if there is an elevator, then there are no extra costs, assuming that everything can fit in the elevator. Sometimes if there is really bad access, sometimes they might need to bring a crane, or sometimes they might need to bring things up the stairwell. There's always solutions, but any extra services like that would have extra costs. So if you do know where you're moving to, it's best to tell your shipper as early as possible, and he can check out the access there. So we can offer a discount on the insurance mainly for if you're coming through Nefesh B'Nefesh. There are group rates if you want to join a group together, and people, as a group of 3 or more sign a contract. We can give you a discount. They're not huge discounts. There's not a whole lot of room to move on these quotes, but it all helps. Another thing to be aware of that in terms of costs is there's a number of Christian organizations that will give Olim thousands of dollars towards their shipment. I have information about those groups. If you want me to send it to you, you can see my email there in the chat window, and I'm happy to send you all of our information, which is a brochure and as well as a link to these groups that will provide assistance to Jews that are moving to Israel. I guess lastly, when you're looking at the quotes, it's really important to compare apples to apples when you're looking at quotes. It's really easy when there's so many factors in a shipping quote to either leave certain things off or to have them so they can stick things into the not included section, and then later you get hit with more fees. So if a quote looks low, then make sure you ask all the necessary questions about what it includes, and if there's things that are not included in the not included section of the quote, because what you want to get to, it can be confusing when you get different quotes because different companies use different terms for, especially for the fees that happen in Israel. We call them destination fees. They're often called terminal handling charges, or THC, port fees or port taxes. There's really a bunch of different names, and often people will say, well, does your quote include this? And because it's mentioned in a different quote and yours doesn't mention it. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but there's different terms. But the thing you need to get to is what's the bottom line, what's the total costs that they're in their quote, and once you get to the bottom line, you're comparing the same services and you've got the totals, then you can really compare the quotes. So I think we have arrived at the end of the presentation. And if you guys have any questions at this point, now's the time to ask me. Let me know. Each move needs to be really tailored, so you're welcome to contact me, and I'll talk you through whatever issues you're thinking of in terms of your shipment. And then once we have a survey done, then it'll even be more clear in terms of what your options are. So I'm happy to do that for any of you if you haven't already started that process. You can see my email over there or my toll-free number. I can put up my toll-free number here from the U.S. if any of you want to give me a call. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask right now, and let me know if you thought the presentation was helpful, if you have any suggestions for other things I should cover, or I'd be happy to hear your feedback. It was a quiet group. It says there are eight people here, but it was a quiet group. We had our first week when everybody was moving. Everybody was starting to get in the moving process. We had about 40 people, and we had lots and lots of questions. Now we've had smaller groups of about 10 people each week. Anybody have any questions at this point, or should I just wrap it up? Alrighty. Well, was it helpful? Was the presentation, did you guys feel like you got some good information for you, or everything was clear? Alrighty, so I am going to...
You can wait for someone to say, you want to get any questions to answer. The questions are very helpful.
Did he answer the question? I'll see.
Yeah, I wrote it down. If you pack it yourself, it won't be insured.
Alrighty, so I'm going to wrap it up. I appreciate your coming, and I'm going to have this presentation recorded, so you can listen to it again. Okay, here there's one question. Hold on, no questions for now. It's very helpful. I'm glad. Somebody sent an email. It's great. You're very welcome. Okay, good. I'm glad it was helpful. You know, you have my contact information there. If you want to be in touch, and I'm happy to sort of carry on the process of helping you decide on your shipment and ultimately getting a quote and ultimately getting to Israel. So you know, as we said in Pesach, B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. Okay, be in touch. Take care.